Good morning. It's Friday, May 14th, and every morning I have my morning coffee and I go through the news. I've got some feed burner feeds set up and I post those to my Twitter feed. And I just kind of stepping back and kind of looking at what was in the feed and kind of got me thinking. So I'm going to share some thoughts here. So I will share my screen now. That's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to stop sharing that and I'm going to share screen, share window. Here we go. All right, I'll get faster at that as time goes on. But anyhow, here's the Twitter feed. I want to make sure that you can see this here. If I can find my StreamYards. Yep, okay, you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at. So we go into the Twitter feed and we're going to just start with mortgage rates dipped to 2.94. But all the pundits out there are saying we're going to see higher rates because of inflation. But yet we're seeing it dip because there's, economy slowing down. There's theory that the Fed has boxed themselves in the corner that they need to keep rates low. So I'm not sure what direction those rates are going to go. I'm guessing if they go up, they're not going to go up by a whole lot. I did read one of these articles. In fact, I think it was a Housing Wire article that thought it might peak out around 3.3%. Then talk about appraising in this fast escalating market. Inflation seems to be the key. And inflation is running hot. This is another mortgage rates. This is more inflation, but this is with housing inflation. Prices rose 99% of all metro areas in 2021. Existing inventory might have bottomed out. That's an interesting article. And then building prices, materials continue to escalate. You can kind of see the graph here from the National Association of Home Builders. That's more inflation. Inflation concerns not reflected in latest mortgage rate survey. This is housing market topping out. Lawrence Yoon with National Association of Realtors. And then here's Yahoo. There are reasons to be worried about inflation. So inflation seems to be kind of the topic. And multifamily, inflation, economic reopening. Yeah, so basically what I'm noticing the trend is we've got inflation worries on the market in the economy overall. And how will that impact the housing market? The inflation is usually recorded in the consumer price index, which is, stop sharing here, share screen. Okay, I'm just going to share the whole screen so it's easier. Consumer price index, this is the official stat. This is off the FRED database, Federal Reserve out of St. Louis. And it doesn't look like any real drastic changes, but they took out housing, fuel, and food out of the CPI. So a lot of people argue this is not a fair assessment of what real inflation is anymore. They're kind of manipulated stats. The other one to kind of keep an eye on is the producer price index. You see a little spike here. This isn't showing a whole lot to me. Shadow stats, shadowgovernmentstats.com or shadowstats.com. They run a different formula, and the blue line shows the shadow stats, inflation, consumer inflation, and then the red is the official inflation. So the official inflation is kind of showing right around 4%. The shadow stats is pushing it closer to 8%. This one is, again, around 4%. And I'm not sure what they did on this one. They called it the alternate. And then this one's a little over 10%. So call that 12, 13%. So if we just say the real inflation is running probably 8 to 12%. And then the housing market, I kind of want to get into the inventory again. This, of course, is for the Twin Cities, but this is emblematic of the whole nation. we go back to 2007, 2006, we ramped up supply, and then we went up to about 34,000 homes for sale in our metro area. And then now we're down to under 8,000, about 7,800. So going into that crash, we had a surplus of inventory. Here we have a shortage of inventory, but we've been down that road before. So I kind of want to jump over to this screen. So the Great Recession, I'm going to call it from 2007 to 2012. I know officially they just call it 2007 to 2008, but the housing market sat flat on its back till about 2012 as far as adding inventory. So builders were not building homes during that period. So we were not adding supply to the market. So that created this shortage that we're in now of homes. And we know with this inflation that the material price, the lumber prices, copper prices, that all the components that go into building a new home are skyrocketing, right? And there's supply issues, there's theories on why that's happening. And then obviously there's just inflation itself. So we've choked off the availability of inventory from about 2007 to 2012. And this is kind of a vision of what's happening right now. I just kind of wanted to give a visual. If we have this as the housing market here, we have a generation of millennials that were not buying during that 2007 to 2012 because the economy was kind of flat and they didn't have the jobs to get into the housing. And then they were just coming of age too. So, and then we added money supply. So we got this huge bubble trying to push its way through the housing market. And we don't have that inventory to support that kind of demographic. So the millennials and the baby boomers are competing for the same housing stock, but we didn't expand the housing stock. And then we dumped in a ton of money into the supply. So now they're able to bid up the house prices. So that's really the dynamics that's going on right now. And that's kind of just the visual that I thought it was easy to explain after kind of going through all those articles on what's happening out there. Here's a visual of that bubble coming through that housing market. The baby boomers, they're running between ages 55 and 75 right now. You can kind of see this bubble right here, this boom. And so they're starting to hit that retirement age. But, at 75, most of them are in pretty good shape. They're not really selling their houses and moving out. And even if they did, where would they move to, right? Most of them are going to be better off staying in their home. So I don't see the boomers selling off their inventory anytime soon. They're pretty young yet. 55 is still a young age. So, and that's kind of the bulk of the baby boomers anyhow, is kind of in that 60 to 65 range. So they're probably going to be in their houses 15 to 25 years more. And then down here, we have the millennials age 26 to 40, and they're in the job market now. They're at the home buying stage in life, and they're competing for the same houses as the boomers. And everyone forgets about my generation, Gen X. I mean, we're in here, we're a smaller generation. We do exist, and we're competing for the same houses, right? So the 20 to 24-year-olds, we kind of have, it looks like a bust here, but I'm not sure how this is going to play out yet. This is pretty early to tell. When I was in college, they were talking about we're Gen X, we're right behind the boomers, and there's going to be no population behind us to buy the housing. So I think it was one of the professors at the University of Minnesota was talking about we're going to have to cut off water and sewer to neighborhoods because there's no population to support behind the boomers. Because we only looked at the bubble going forward. We didn't understand that a good economic time will produce another generation, or lack of foresight, or they were just pushing an agenda, which is probably more likely. But we don't know what's going to be behind the millennials. But right now, this is what we're competing with. So say 26 to 75 is all competing for the same housing stock, and we did not add housing to the stock. That creates problems. This is the other problem. This is the other bubble pushing through the housing market. This is the M2 money stock. During the COVID, the Rona, whatever you want to call it, the Federal Reserve printed money, gave out stimulus checks, and we added a ton of money supply. I don't even know what these official stats are. It's about 25% of all the dollars floating in circulation were printed in the last year. Is one of the figures I heard, but you can see just the spike straight up on money and supply. So now that money is trying to find its best use, and it's chasing assets. And the housing market is one of the first assets it chases, the stock market as well. So you see huge growth in the stock market, you see huge asset appreciation in the housing market, and you have a lot of people competing for the same number of homes. I don't see any of this stuff dissipating. The amount of homes we're short, I've heard numbers around 3.5 million for the nation. I'll kind of pull some population and housing inventory stats later and kind of gauge how much inventory we're truly short. And that's going to vary market to market. But it's going to take a long time to ramp up production. You know, we had production sitting on its back for 8 years. We got 8 years to make up for on building homes. So we're going to be in this mess for a number of years to come. Certainly there is some headwinds that may slow this down a bit. One of them might be raising interest rates. Interest rates might slow down the growth of appreciation. I call it inflation of home prices. So that might tamper it a little bit. And then they talk about this headwind of these forbearances, that this big wave of foreclosure is going to come through. I don't think there's going to be anywhere near enough to cover this kind of demand with this much money floating out there. So I think it's a pretty safe bet right now for housing for a number of years to go. I don't think we're in a bubble. It is kind of uncharted territory, but we've never printed money like this before. And I don't know if we've had a demographic dynamic like this before either. So that's what I'm seeing in the housing market. I just wanted to share that with you. That's kind of what I took away from, going through my news feed this morning. So with that, have a great weekend, and we will touch base with you next week.